everybody. So today we're gonna continue on with the nodal axis in the signs and the houses. Today we're gonna look at the south node and the north node nodal axis in Taurus and Scorpio, in the signs of Taurus and Scorpio. So we're talking about how the south node functions, or how the north node functions. And again, just as a disclaimer, these are not set in stone. These are just some ideas that you can use when you chart weave. You might find that some of these fit great. You might find that some of these don't fit for you for the chart that you're weaving. They're just some ideas to get your own intuition and creativity going. Okay, so let's start with the south node in Taurus. Okay, so if you see a south node in Taurus, and Taurus is the how, right? You might be looking at somebody who, you might be looking at a previous lifetime story, or the person just coming into this life comfortable, operating in a more materialistic way. That's not always a bad thing. Sometimes materialism is thought of as a bad thing. It's not always a bad thing. But they might have operated that way, been inclined to operate that way. Could have been out of necessity, could have been out of something like greed, whatever. You know, there could be a lot of reasons for that, but you might be looking at somebody who's comfortable functioning that way. Somebody who, the person might have, the person might have a lot of patience. They might function in a more patient way, even when they shouldn't, perhaps. They're probably pretty used to being steady, or trying to function in a steady way, in a stable and steady way. Again, while that sounds great and everything, and it certainly can be, with the south node, you kind of want to veer on the side of it being challenging. So even the things that sound good, I'm not telling you to twist it into a challenging or negative thing, but you might want your mind to drift more that way. So if we're talking about somebody who we think might have been stable and steady and secure in a previous lifetime, we might go with, this is not universal and would depend on the rest of the nodal axis story, but your mind might drift to somehow this didn't actually serve the person in some way. It didn't serve them. It didn't serve their soul the way that it should have. You might be dealing with somebody who is Taurus energy can be stubborn. So you might be dealing with somebody that operated in a more stubborn way. Not always a bad thing, but it could be, or it could be a challenging thing. You know, it just kind of depends on the rest of the story. You could be dealing with somebody who comes into this life naturally functioning in a little bit more of a hedonistic way. A pleasure-seeking way. The rest of the story would let you know if that's to their detriment or not, you know. So those kinds of things might be places that my mind would go if I saw a south node in Taurus. There are obviously a lot of other keywords and things that you could throw in there, but that's, you know, those are some of the ones that, you know, that's where my mind would go first. And the backdrop would depend on what house the south node falls in, and all kinds of things, where the planetary ruler of the south node falls, all that kind of stuff. So we have a south node in Taurus. That means that we have a north node in Scorpio. Now, when you see the north node in Scorpio, the person, okay, like, and I'm going to be careful when I say this, because I'm not telling people with north nodes in Scorpio to totally, Like, okay, like if you have a South Node in Taurus, right, and you operate as a pretty stable, secure person, right? I'm not telling you to completely throw all of that away all of the time, right? But the the North Node in Scorpio might speak to somebody needing to embrace things that are a little more extreme, that do kind of throw them off of that stableness. They might not, that stableness that they have, it may not be serving their soul's evolution correctly. There might be an intensity that they need to, and an extremity that they do need to experience this time around. You know, how all of that comes to pass, how all of that might come to pass, has to do with, you know, the rest of the Nodal Axis story. But you might be looking at something along those lines. The person needs to also generally embrace depth, which, you know, and I'm not saying that Taurus South Node people aren't deep, but if they're trying so much for security and for, you know, trying to operate in a stable, secure sort of way, they might be less inclined to go as deep, because that can kind of also throw you off of that, right? The deeper you go into things, whatever that thing is. But there's usually a need to embrace depth, experience depth. I would also bring in embracing things that are more taboo in nature or off limits. That seems like that could be possible. Probably experiencing death and rebirth. That also seems highly likely with the North Node in Scorpio. Something along those lines. Passion is a big one. Feeling that kind of depth of passion, allowing yourself to do that. All of those things seem possible with the North Node in Scorpio. Of course, with the North Node in Scorpio, you would want to look at where the planetary rulers are. Here we are talking about Mars by traditional rulership, Pluto by modern rulership. I would look at both. If you don't want to look at both, you don't have to. But I would look at both. Personally. But whatever you want to do is cool. And then with the Taurus South Node, you would look at where Venus is to flesh that story out further. Okay, so now let's go on to, let's reverse it. Let's do the South Node in Scorpio. So the person with the South Node in Scorpio, there might have been too much. There could have been, because you do want to veer on the side of things being more challenging. There could have been too much intensity, functioning with too much intensity, too much depth. Perhaps there was too much death and rebirth, too much transformation, too much metamorphosis, too much of this, too often. Again, there is something a little chaotic about a South Node in Scorpio, and a lot of it has to do with that, with the things I just mentioned, you know. It can kind of manifest that way. Now also, this axis, the Taurus Scorpio axis for the North and South nodes, I find that these tend to be pretty hard for letting go of the South node, because both Scorpio and Taurus can hold on to things for dear fucking life, right? They both can. The difference is Scorpio does tend to Scorpio does know it needs to transform, right? Scorpio does know this. Scorpio energy does know this. Whereas Taurus energy, because it is so stable, I think Taurus energy probably has a hard time with it. But both sign energies hold on to things for dear fucking life. So this particular axis, seeing the north and south nodes in this axis, not universal, but you might think to yourself, if you see this person might have a harder time letting go of those south node traits and moving into the north node. Your mind could go there. That might not always be the case, but my mind might go there. It might go there, might drift there. You would have to decide if that actually works here or not for the chart you're weaving. With Scorpio with the South Node in Scorpio, there's also probably something with sex going on with sex. This might be somebody who needs to have a lot of sex or feels like they do. Or depending on what else is going on, there might be a hang up about wanting to have sex. There's usually, not universal, but there's sometimes is something going on with sex here when you see a South Node Scorpio. Something going on with sex. Or your mind could drift that way. It may not fit, but it could drift that way. Obsessive compulsive traits, behaviors. Those might be carried over from a previous life. You might notice that in these people. They might be more inclined to function that way or have things like that. I'm not talking about actually being diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm not saying that at all. But there might be some obsessions or some compulsions that they seem to have. These people seem to have. And that would generally have to do with the South Node story. The rest of the story. And again, for the South Node in Scorpio, you would want to look at where Mars and Pluto fall in the chart, or Mars or Pluto, depending on what kind of rulership you like to use, to flesh out the story further. Okay, so now we will go to, where is it? The North Node in Taurus. And here we're coming from that Scorpio South Node, and this person is wanting to learn how to calm the fuck down. Seriously. And to calm down the intensity, to calm down calm down the obsessive compulsiveness, if any exists. Calm down the extremity, calm down the depth, calm all of that down. And live in a more calm way, live in a more stable way, live in a more secure way. I'm not telling people with the North Node in Taurus to completely remove all their intensity or completely remove all their depth. That would be fucking stupid. But maybe it's not always necessary to be so intense. Maybe it's not always necessary to go as deep as you do. Perhaps it's really just not that deep all of the time, you know. Perhaps you don't need to there can be like an overcomplication with Scorpio South Nodes. With these things, functioning this way can overcomplicate things. There is a need with the North Node in Taurus to make things not as complicated. To learn patience, something else. To feel secure, obviously. All of those sorts of things. Becoming more practical seems like a big one too. And really just being more calm. That may not always fit, but I do find that there is something about calmness that the person, and that doesn't mean that like you lose your drive and your passion and all of that, you know, your drive for passion, that sort. I'm not saying that, right? But just calming down a little bit. does seem important with the North Node in Taurus. Generally anyway, might not always fit, but generally. Yeah, so I'm gonna get going because this is kind of long. But if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck with Astrology. I am at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Abaturno Astrology on Instagram. If you're watching this on Instagram and want to follow us on YouTube or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do on YouTube, you can search for Let's Fuck with Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, you can find us on the subreddit Let's Fuck with Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, you can go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.